Hello, Bethany friends, and welcome to this presentation. This is a presentation we've made to the lead team and to the administrative board, and now we're wanting to share with you. This is a high-level presentation, and as you'll see later, there'll be more opportunities for discussion, but we wanted to present this information to you. We've been in a planning process for a while, thinking about how to grow Bethany and bring more vitality to it, and so this is a response to that. When Bethany began many years ago, some of you will remember the story that a group went out and walked through the neighborhood, talked to different people, and asked them if they had a church home or what kind of church home they would be looking for. And out of that, a number of churches in our area were established, including Bethany. After that, as Bethany went from one place to another and then finally onto this campus and settled in, the church began to grow real rapidly. And Bob Grimes, who was one of our beloved longtime pastors at Bethany, once made the comment that Bethany was a red guerrilla church. What that meant was that it's a good church, it's in a good location, a great neighborhood, the area is growing, people are moving in, and really all you have to do is open the doors and people will show up. And the summary of that, as he would say it was, even if a red guerrilla was the pastor of this church, it would still grow. Now, 30-something years later, our surrounding area and our culture has changed a lot. The area is no longer growing at the same rate. People are moving in, and instead of doing the thing when they arrive at first looking for churches, they're looking for other kinds of amenities that they are interested in. And so our landscape has changed a little, which calls for us to make some changes. When we began Bethany and during Bob's time, we had a kind of passive model for how we reached out to people, like floating with a bobber. You just kind of put it out there and wait for the fish to show up. So all we had to do was open the doors and people will come, people will show up. If you invite your new neighbor, they show up, people will drive past and see the church, and that's all the advertising we need. Some of you will remember the story about Jim and Betty Scott moving to the area and buying a house where they did because it was close to the church. People nowadays are doing things very differently and come with very different sets of criteria and questions for us. So now our model needs to shift a little. No longer can we be passive, we need to be more active. And instead of float fishing, it's more like fly fishing. We need to go out, we need to find them, we need to go to where they are. So this is a go out model. We're going to have events where we, do big events on the parking lot and in people's front yards and so forth. But the primary function of all this is to build relationships with people, to come alongside them where you work, where you're in school, the clubs you're in, all those kind of places, and create relationships. And then slowly, having built those, bring them into the community of faith. And so we're creating plans for how we reach new people, how we meet people where they're at, moving from a passive model to a much more active model. Next slide. The reason for this, as we have looked back at our statistics over the last several years, is we've noticed that things have begun to slow down and decline in our congregation. We've looked at numbers from 2015 to 2019 on these graphs, and as you can see, during that period of time, our membership declined by 4%, our weekly worship declined by 14%. Our income remained relatively flat, but since inflation has taken some bite out of that, it actually has not really kept up as we have needed it to do. Next slide. This is really the main significant piece. From 2015 to 2019, our adult new members declined by 50%. Our average weekly new and continuing visitors declined by 31%. Now, I know some of you are aware there were issues in 2019 with the General Conference, and 2020 was the pandemic, but you can see that these trends start before that. And so there's simply no denying the direction of these trends, that we have been in a series of years of decline for the last 6-7 years. Next slide. So as we looked at that and reviewed those statistics, we saw basically three paths going forward. One is that we can keep doing what we're doing and expect to have continued decline. The old saying, if you do the same thing the same way, you get the same results. The second thing was we could do some minor kinds of changes. We could try to find things that would help stop the decline, stabilize the church, maybe even increase a little bit back to 2017, 2018. Or the third option is to be more bold, to keep some of what we're doing and at the same time make room for new and different things to increase our effectiveness as disciples of Christ and reach a larger audience in our surrounding community. And the question for you as you're watching through this, and you hear these three options is, which one of those sounds good to you? And do we want to change the trajectory? Are we willing to make the kinds of changes that are going to be required in order to change the direction of the church and restore it to a place of growth and vitality? Next slide. This was the overall process. We met several years back and talked about our mission, our vision, our values, the things that were important to us, our behaviors. And from that, then we defined that mission statement, and you've heard us preach on this. And then we moved into an analysis of our surrounding community using information from Mission Insight. And then we had teams that formed to brainstorm ideas around that information and the intersection of those different pieces. So our mission and vision, this is going to sound familiar to you, hopefully. God calls Bethany to be a community participating in God's mission of love, transforming us and the world. And then this statement that you hear pretty much every Sunday. We do this by leading people to experience God's love, know Jesus Christ, and grow in his image. So based on that statement, we went out and we looked at our community. This is the boundary we defined. These are different neighborhood groups under Mission Insight. And we kind of looked at that in terms of, what's really, who are our close neighbors and where do our folks live? And this defined this boundary as you see it in this map. The information from that, the demographics we got, were that in that area, there's 140,555 people. They live in 56,353 households. 20,000 of those households have children in them, and 64% of those people are not involved in a religious community. That means there are 90,000 people in our surrounding community that do not have a church home. That's a huge demographic. Also, as we looked at this, we had an age breakout we came to, and if you'll notice the pie chart, this is the surrounding community pie chart. And if you look at that, you can see how the different brackets are broken up. But the significant number is that 64% of the people in our community are between the ages of 25 and 54. When we look at Bethany as a congregation, 37% of our congregation are between 25 and 54. Our demographic is skewed older than the area around us. And that informs some of our decisions about things that we might need to do. We broke this into three main initiatives. Some of these got redefined a little during the pandemic. We had earlier taken the information we had and broke that and looked at our different ministries and evaluated our ministries. But with the pandemic, we kind of had to step back a little bit and reconsider some things. And the three main initiatives we came up with was to re-engage Bethany members, to improve family-friendly ministry, and to lead new people to experience God's love, know Jesus Christ, and grow in his image. Those broke out in this way. Re-engaging Bethany members. This area was led by Cecilia Barentine and a group of her people, volunteers and staff as well. They identified four different areas. One was to build safe activities for people to begin connecting, including intergenerational and missional components, places where people could come together and build connections with one another while they were in ministry in a way that was safe. The second one was to create a permanent Bethany campus prayer walk, kind of like a Stations of the Cross, except modeled specifically for us, to help people reconnect both to our campus, to their friends and fellows in the church, but at the same time also to be a place for enhanced spiritual growth. The third item was to use social media more effectively so that we could enhance the significance of our activities and get word out better to people about that. And then the fourth was to increase small group in-person connectional activities, encouraging small groups to strengthen community through their activities and new activities, and being aware of opportunities both in person and virtual for things like game night, phone chains, outdoor meetups, visitation opportunities, and so forth. Different ways for us to come together, either for study or for recreation or just for fellowship in ways that were safe and yet also allowed us to interact with each other in strong personal ways. All of these were things that they came up with, and a number of them are already being carried out. The second area was to improve family-friendly ministry. This was under Lori Pierce. And again, she had a group of people that she worked with in this. And it's important to hear in this that age span in her group went from the very young to those of us who have a little gray or white in our hair. So it was quite a wide range. The first area they talked about was to attract new families, creating big events. And you've seen some of those events on the campus over the past couple of months as we've had big things that we've invited people to come for trunk or treat or for the egg hunt, those kinds of events. They've planned a targeted outreach to Bethany School and the parents of the children in Bethany School, and they're working on improving communications for families. The second area was to build communities with families, bringing families together to support one another and build community with each other as they're on this journey of raising children, to create fellowship opportunities for families, create a pathway to leadership for parents in the church to bring their concerns to the leadership and be heard in that, and to create opportunities for feedback about the ministries of the church and how we can better serve families in our ministries. The third area was to improve worship experiences for families, to think about how we can improve our current services that we already have to include more family-friendly elements. And some of these, again, are already happening, but again, we're in process with this. The third area was to lead new people to experience God's love, know Jesus Christ, and grow in his image. This area was led by Thomas Johnson, and it basically broke into two main areas. One was to invite people into the church, to improve communication to the surrounding community, to focus outreach events on bringing in the surrounding community, reach out to our immediate mission kind of focus that we showed you on that map earlier. The second was to send people out, to go out, to develop a model for us as Bethany members to be comfortable and effective in sharing Christ beyond the walls of the church, to use our missions program to better reach people in the areas that we already serve, and specifically to increase engagement with our Anderson Mill neighborhood, our back fence neighbors, if you will. And you may or may not be aware, when we were planning Easter and we talked about doing a service outdoors, we were a little concerned about how our immediate neighbors behind us might perceive that it would be loud for sure because it's outdoors. So Lori and Epi went and walked the neighborhood and invited our neighbors to come and join us on Easter Sunday. And some of them did come and join us on Easter Sunday. So that's just one simple kind of example of how we can reach out better to our neighborhood. Now, as we move forward on this, I want to remind you that the big question is, are we willing to make the changes to change this trajectory? And that means several things as we talk about it at a high level. One, we're going to have to implement the initiative team plans, the things that they have talked about that we've shared with you just now. They're going to need help implementing that. They've done a lot of work, but they need more of you to come alongside them as they carry these plans out. Next, we're going to hire a communications director. We're already out on the market advertising for this. We feel the need to be more effective in our communication internally as well as externally. And we've brought some new younger staff in the last couple of years who've made us very much aware that there's possibilities we're just not taking advantage of. So we would need to bring somebody on who brings that kind of expertise and knowledge to our staff. Next, we need to embrace a culture for change that leads to transformation. I want to be clear, not just change for change's sake, but change that leads to transformation. And that has to be embraced within the staff, within the lead team, within the administrative board, and within the broader church. Our founder, John Wesley of the Methodist movement, was very much a change agent in his time. A priest in the Anglican church, he went out of the walls of the church. He preached in the market squares. He preached at the gates of factories and mines. He took the gospel out to people who were not coming to the church. And as those people heard the gospel and embraced it, he formed them into new kinds of societies and classes, organized them. And the Methodist movement became this huge movement across England and then spilling over into the United States and finally to the whole world. But what he did at the time was a very big change. And it was one that was powerful and one that you and I are the beneficiaries of. But one at the time that not everybody embraced as well. The officials in the church found this somewhat threatening. So, what we need to do is be aware that when we make changes, that sometimes that makes us uncomfortable or someone else uncomfortable, but we need to embrace them. And we have to be willing to recognize that not everything that we change and try is going to be successful. One of the things that we tried earlier this year was a Super Bowl Sunday event out in the parking lot. And what we learned was people would rather watch the Super Bowl at home and be in that kind of environment than out on the parking lot. And so we learned, okay, that doesn't work so well. But the egg hunt and the extravaganza event that we did on Palm Sunday brought in a great crowd. 400 something people came and participated in that. So we're learning as we go through this. We're going to have a willingness to try things and a willingness to accept failure and learn from that. But above and beyond all of that, we have to be willing to embrace change for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, as we move forward from here, one of the pieces we've started talking about is worship. And there are some changes we're talking about in relationship to our worship piece. And I'm going to invite Thomas Johnson to share some more with you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to share with you some of those worship changes that we are considering. We've broken these out into 3 different categories, and they vary in terms of how big of a change and how long we think it will take to implement those changes. You can see here the first category is to make existing worship services more family friendly. The second one is to change our Sunday morning schedule to be more accommodating for all. And the third category is to look into creating a new worship service that would target a younger generation. We have put those into a timeline. So just to show you how we are approaching these, we think that this phase 1, implementing small changes we can start that right now. And in fact, we have started to implement some of those already. The phase 2, which is to look into a new Sunday morning schedule. We are starting that process right now. And we think that to do that well, we would need to really invest good time in that through the summer. Phase 3, looking into a new worship service possibility. We think that that is a needed thing to look into, but it's also a huge project. And so to give that the time and energy and resources that we need to do that well, we think we need to wait till after we're finished looking at a new Sunday morning schedule. And then we can take the right resources and really invest them to make a good decision about whether we move forward with that and how. So to just in a minute, I'm going to tell you briefly about phases 1 and 3, but we're going to focus our time on phase 2 because we want to start that conversation as a whole church right now. So phase 1, to change our current worship services to make them more family friendly, there's a number of things that we call low-hanging fruit because they're the things that we would be foolish not to just try it. So we are in the process of doing some of those things that you can see there. There's a few other things that we're not quite sure how we do that, but we think that we could problem solve that fairly in a fairly simple way. And so these other ideas in that bottom list, we may be trying those in the coming weeks or months, but overall, we don't think those are the huge rock the boat kind of things. So all that to say, we're trying these and looking into how we can try these. We think we can move forward with these fairly easily. Now, if we jump over to phase 3, things get a lot more difficult. Investing in a new worship service takes a lot of resources, and it could have a really big payoff for our church in terms of how we are reaching people and leading people to know Jesus and grow in his image. But we want to make sure we are going through the right process to do that. So as I said, we're gonna put off starting that process until the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. The main idea you can see here in these bullet points is that if we want to reach a new target audience, we probably need to look into starting a new service. Now, we don't have a bunch of ideas about what that looks like. That would be a part of that research and decision-making process. But just so you know, we are not starting this process yet. We're going to put that off until the late summer, early fall. And now our Sunday morning schedule. This is the part that we really want to start talking about today. The main reason to look into a change in our Sunday morning schedule has to do with our kids and our student Sunday school ministries. In the current schedule with 2 Sunday school hours, the kids in student Sunday school are so spread out that it is really difficult for them to build momentum and have an exciting and compelling program that families will want to invite their friends to. Over the years, the number of families at Bethany has declined. And so there was a time where 2 Sunday school hours were needed. We no longer need 2 Sunday school hours. And in fact, what I would say is having 2 Sunday school hours for kids and for student ministries, it kind of deflates the energy and makes it feel like there's just not a lot going on. And if you're curious about those numbers, how many kids and students could we fit in a single Sunday school hour? What would the tipping point be for when we would need to consider 2 hours of Sunday school? Well, kids right now has the capacity in 1 hour to do 225 kids and leaders. Their pre-pandemic average for the 2 years before the pandemic even got here, over 2 hours, they had 88 kids and leaders. That's over 2 hours. And it's similar with students in the Cornerstone, the way that we have remodeled that building. It's very functional for them. They can have up to 150 students and leaders in one Sunday school hour. The pre-pandemic average for the 2 years leading up to the pandemic is around 30 students and leaders over 2 hours. So you can see we are so far from needing 2 hours. I'll just reemphasize, it makes it so that they have a hard time building energy and momentum, which is critical for building student and kids programs. And if we want to be a church that continues to reach families well, as Bethany has done for so many years, we really need to make sure that this is a priority. Another complication of having 2 hours is that this has made it really hard for student and kids ministries to get enough leaders. And what ends up happening is a lot of the parents that feel like they have to lead those classes, because if they don't, their kids won't have classes to go to. Those parents end up getting burned out because, frankly, we just don't have enough of them to cover 2 hours. We have attempted to recruit across, the whole congregation, and we have had some great leaders come out of that, but overall, that has not solved the problem. We still have a leadership deficiency in terms of volunteer Sunday morning leaders. This ends up being a heavy load for our staff to carry. Our student and children's staff have to then spend a lot of time trying to recruit leaders and fill spots, when really we want them to be spending time with kids, spending time with families in a more positive way. The other thing that I hear sometimes as I'm trying to plug adults into classes is sometimes we will have a new family or a new couple or a new adult join our church, and they will want to be in a certain worship service, either 9:30 or 11 o'clock. They usually choose that based on worship style preference. And then when I go to connect them with a Sunday school class, sometimes the classes they are most interested in actually meet at the same time as their worship hour. That becomes more of a problem the younger the adult is that I'm trying to connect. And what I mean by that is we have a number of older adult Sunday school classes, and that's great. So there's a lot of options for older adults that join Bethany. There's only 2 classes that have a critical mass of families with young kids. So we have one at each hour, and that really limits the options. I also, I've talked to groups over the years who are interested in starting a new Sunday school class, maybe for new or potentially new families, but I don't have enough of those families to do it at 2 hours. And in fact, those groups tend to be spread out across traditional and contemporary worship services. So it's hard to figure out how we can get enough momentum to start another worship service. So I want to offer a potential solution. So a potential solution that we have talked about, we think is something we need to look into as a church. The potential solution that we should look into is to look at a one Sunday school hour schedule, a single Sunday school hour schedule that would have worship on either side of that one Sunday school hour. And that way everyone has Sunday school at the same time. What this would do is it would allow for momentum and building up energy for our families so that those programs can get off the ground. They needed that before the pandemic. I think coming back after the pandemic, we especially need to give them a fair shot at building momentum. That's going to be really important. It opens up more Sunday school options for our parents, which is very important. It doubles the Sunday school options they would have. And I think that's a really good thing. As I said earlier, it also makes it more possible to plant new classes in the future. And then one of my favorite parts, it creates a common middle hour for church-wide community building and special events. Now, if any of you were here on Easter Sunday, and I know some of you came and you were out in the parking lot eating breakfast tacos, enjoying some really good coffee, that was such a phenomenal time for us as a church. It doesn't matter which worship service you go to be together, to enjoy some good community time. And there are certain times of the year we would really love to be able to do that. And so if we had 2 main worship hours with a Sunday school hour in the middle, we would be able to do that a few times a year. Maybe cancel Sunday school, have a big church-wide party between the 2 worship services. I think that would be good. I also want to mention, for those of you who are wondering, Don't we need 2 Sunday school hours for all of our adult classes? Well, again, there was a time when we needed that. Our adult Sunday school attendance has also declined over the years. And while we do use a lot of our space, there are actually some open rooms. There are only a few of our classes that are double used on Sunday morning. And I think if we wanted to figure out a way to make it so every class can have their own room, that's a good room for them, we could definitely do that. Here is a sample Sunday morning schedule, and I want to emphasize this is a sample. We're not at the point in this process where we think we have a good proposal per se. That'll come later, and Tom will tell you about our timeline for looking into that. But this sample schedule, it's just an idea of how it could work. With either a traditional or a contemporary service as the earlier service, a middle Sunday school hour, and then either the traditional or contemporary service as the later service. It's important to know that the Taizé service could fit at either that early or the later hour. It could work either way, and that would be a part of the plan. It's also important to know that this Sunday morning schedule change does not change how we're thinking about Saturday and how we bring back the Saturday service, and it doesn't affect our midweek worship options that we have been doing for a long time either.
So these are kind of the next steps or the plan going forward. And I want to touch on something Thomas mentioned about rooms is that not only are we have we seen a decline in the numbers of people here, we've also added space in our building over the last several years. So the combination of those two make plenty of space for us to accommodate everybody in 1 hour. Now, we want to lay this out to you because we're aware that some of these changes can be disruptive and a little uncomfortable. And yet, we've just spent the last year being disrupted in pretty much everything we've done. And so we felt like, well, if we're going to talk about this, let's do it now. We're already out of our normal patterns. As we said, we presented this to lead team and ad board. We've had some opening discussions with them. We're in the process now talking to some other congregations about how they've done their schedules and how that's worked and what that's looked like. In early May, we're going to send this information out, and that's what you're looking at right now. This is a video for you to get some information about this. And then later in May and early in June, we're going to host 2 town hall meetings. These will be both in person and online at the same time in the worship center so that you can come and if you have questions you want to ask, you can ask questions. If you want to give us feedback, you can give us feedback so we can have a really good discussion about these proposed changes that we're looking at. Then getting all that information together, we'll kind of pull all that together and look at it and see what it tells us and try to reach a decision about what we feel is the best response to this. And we'll come back at the end of June. We'll have a church-wide meeting to kind of lay that out and explain this is why what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so hopefully everybody will understand what's going on. That gives us time then to begin preparing. We need some time to prepare implementation, especially in student and children's for programming for those Sunday school hours. And the kickoff Sunday, more than likely, is August 15th. And the reason that date is picked is that is the Sunday between when Leander School starts back up and Round Rock School starts back up. So we kind of chose the date in between. This is traditionally our kickoff date in August. So that's the kind of schedule we've looked at and that we are proposing and inviting you to be in this with us. Talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your classmates in your Sunday school class, discuss this, kick it around, and then we're going to want to hear back from you on this. I want to remind you as we're going forward that beyond the worship hour changes, there's a bigger question we're wrestling with, which is what kind of church are we going to be moving forward? Will we want to continue this kind of passive model where we just wait for people to find us and show up? Or are we going to become more active? Christ has called us to be fishers of men and women. And if what we need to do at this point is be more active, proactive, going out to them, then that's part of our call that we've received from Jesus. And we need to begin discerning how that may change things and how we do things differently. So I invite you to begin thinking about that and talking about that with, again, within your groups and your classes as we move forward and discussing that with one another. And I want to remind you, this idea of doing something differently and going out, that's part of our Wesleyan DNA. It's also part of our Bethany DNA. This is how this congregation began in the first place. So we're really, in some ways, reaching back to who we are as we begin to move forward into this future. Um, you're going to have the opportunity to discuss this with us in town hall meetings, but in the meantime, if you want to ask questions about some of these specific areas, or if you want to volunteer to help implement some of these plans, I invite you to reach out to Cecilia for things in the Re-engaging Initiative, Lori in the Family Friendly Ministry Initiative, and Thomas Johnson in the Leading New People Initiative. And they will be happy to engage that with you. If you have some just generalized questions, you can email those to the Bethany address and we'll look at those. If there's specific kinds of things, we'll try to answer those. If we find that we have a number of questions around a certain item, we may actually want to hold that and answer it in the town hall meetings. But we will get back to you in one way or another with an answer to that, and we will receive and listen to your comments. So we want to encourage you to be in communication with us about this. Again, as we're moving forward, I think that the question is, what kind of church do we want to be? Do we want to be passive and continue to just slowly decline? Or do we want to step into this call that Christ has placed on us to become fishers of men and women and reaching out to the people in the world around us at work, at school, and our hobbies and sports and all those kinds of places, and actually sharing the gospel of Christ with the world? That's finally the underlying question we have to answer. I want to thank you for taking the time to view and listen to this. I appreciate you giving that time. I know it's precious. I appreciate your serious consideration of this. I invite you to be in prayer and discernment about it. We need all the help we can get discerning how we move forward in this in a way that's faithful. So I thank you for your participation with us in this process. I want to end us with a word of prayer, so let us have some prayer. So Father, we give you thanks that you honor us by inviting us to be in this mission with you, this mission of reaching people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we ask that as we think about these things and talk about them and pray about them, that you give us a clear leading so that we may step into your future with confidence and with assurance and not with doubt, and move in the direction you would have us move, be the people you would have us be, reach the people who your heart longs for us to reach. We ask you to guide us and lead us in this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you, my brothers and sisters.